In his years of searching, Paul Brennan had followed 11 fruitless leads. It had cost him over $1,300, and he was prepared to go on and on until he located James Holden, no matter how much it took. He fretted under two fears, one that James had indeed suffered a mishap, and the other that James might reveal his secret in a dramatic announcement, or be discovered by some force or agency that would place the whole process in hands that Paul Brennan could not reach. The registered letter from Tim Fisher culminated this 6 years of frantic search. Unlike the previous leads, this spoke with authority, named names, gave dates, and outlined sketchily but adequately the operations of the young man in very plausible prose. Then the letter went on in the manner of a man with his foot in a cleft stick. The writer did not approve of James Holden's operations since they involved his wife and newly adopted daughter, but since wife and daughter were fond of James Holden, the writer could not make any overt move to rid his household of the interfering young man. Paul Brennan was asked to move with caution and in utter secrecy, even to sending the reward in cash to a special post office box. Paul Brennan's reaction was a disappointment to himself. He neither felt great relief nor the desire to exult. He found himself assaying his own calmness and wondering why he lacked emotion over this culmination of so many years of futile effort. He reread the letter carefully to see if there were something hidden in the words that his subconscious had caught, but he found nothing that gave him any reason to believe that this letter was a false lead. It rang true. Brennan could understand Tim Fisher's stated reaction and the man's desire to collect. Brennan even suspected that Fisher might use the reward money for his own private purpose. It was not until he read the letter for the third time that he saw the suggestion to move with caution and secrecy not as its stated request to protect the writer, but as an excellent advice for his own guidance. And then Paul Brennan realized that for 6 years he had been concentrating upon the single problem of having James Holden returned to his custody, and in that concentration he had lost sight of the more important problem of achieving his true purpose of gaining control of the Holden educator. The letter had not been the end of a long quest, but just the signal to start. Paul Brennan, of course, did not give a fig for the Holden estate nor the welfare of James. His only interest was in the machine, and the secret of that machine was locked in the young man's mind and would stay that way unless James could be coerced into revealing it. The secret indubitably existed as hardware in the machine rebuilt in the house on Martin's Hill, but Brennan guessed that any sight of him would cause James to repeat his job of destruction. Brennan also envisioned a self-destructive device that would addle the heart of the machine at the touch of a button, perhaps booby traps fitted like burglar alarms that would ruin the machine at the first touch of an untrained hand. Brennan's mind began to work. He must plan his moves carefully to acquire the machine by stealth. He toyed with the idea of murder and rejected it as too dangerous to chance a repeat, especially in view of the existence of the rebuilt machine. Brennan read the letter again. It gave him to think. James had obviously succeeded in keeping his secret by imparting it to a few people that he could either trust or bind to him, perhaps with the offer of education via the machine, which James, and only James maintained in hiding, could provide. Brennan could not estimate the extent of James Holden's knowledge, but it was obvious that he was capable of some extremely intelligent planning. He was willing to grant the boy the likelihood of being the equal of a long and experienced campaigner, and the fact that James was in the favor of Tim Fisher's wife and daughter meant that the lad would be able to call upon them for additional advice. Brennan counted the daughter Martha in this planning program. Most certainly James would have given the girl an extensive education, too. Everything added up, even to Tim Fisher's resentment. But there was not time to ponder over the efficiency of James Holden's operations. It was time for Paul Brennan to cope, and it seemed sensible to face the fact that Paul Brennan alone could not plot the illegal grab of the Holden educator and at the same time masquerade as the deeply concerned loving guardian. He could label James Holden's little group as an organization, and if he was to combat this organization he needed one himself. Paul Brennan began to form a mental outline of his requirements. First he had to figure out the angle at which to make his attack. Once he knew the legal angle, then he could find ruthless men in the proper position of authority whose ambitions he could control. He regretted that the elder Holden had not allowed him to study civil and criminal law along with his courses in real estate and corporate law. As it was, Brennan was unsure of his legal rights, and he could not plan until he had researched the problem most thoroughly. To his complete surprise, Paul Brennan discovered that there was no law that would stay an infant from picking up his marbles and leaving home. So long as the minor did not become a ward of responsibility of the state, his freedom was as inviolable as the freedom of any adult. The universal interest in missing persons cases is overdrawn because of their dramatic appeal. In every case that comes to important notice, the missing person has left some important responsibilities that had to be satisfied. A person with no moral, legal, or ethical anchor has every right to pack his suitcase and catch the next conveyance for parts unknown. If he is found by the authorities after an appeal by friends or relatives, the missing party can tell the police that, yes, he did leave home and, no, he isn't returning and, furthermore, he does not wish his whereabouts made known, and all the authorities can report is that the missing one is hale, happy, and hearty and wants to stay missing. Under the law, a minor is a minor and there is no proposition that divides one degree of minority from another. Major decisions, such as voting, the signing of binding contracts of importance, the determination of a course of drastic medical treatment, are deemed to be matters that require mature judgment. The age for such decisions is arbitrarily set at age 21. Acts such as driving a car, sawing a plank, or buying food and clothing are considered to be skills that do not require judgment, and therefore the age of demarcation varies with the state and the state legislature's attitude. James was a minor. Presumably he could repudiate contracts signed while a minor, at the time he reached the age of 21. From a practical standpoint, however, anything that James contracted for was expendable and of vital necessity. He could not stop payment on a check for his rent, nor claim that he had not received proper payment for his stories and demand damages. Paul Brennan might possibly interfere with the smooth operation by squawking to the bank that Charles Maxwell was a phantom front for the minor child James Holden. And bankers, being bankers, might very well clog up the operation with a lot of questions. But there was the possibility that James Holden, operating through the agency of an adult, would switch his method. He could even go so far as to bring Brennan to lawsuit to have Brennan stopped from his interference. Child or not, James Holden had been running a checking account by mail for a number of years, which could be used as evidence of his good faith and ability. Indeed, the position of James Holden was so solid that Brennan could only plead personal interest and personal responsibility in the case for securing a writ of habeas corpus to have the person of James Holden returned to his custody and protection. And this of itself was a bit on the dangerous side. A writ of habeas corpus will, by law, cause the delivery of the person to the right hands, but there is no part of the writ that can be used to guarantee that the person will remain thereafter. If Brennan tried to repeat this program, James Holden was very apt to suggest either the rather rare case of barratry or maintenance against Brennan. Barratry consists of the constant harassment of a citizen by the serial entry of lawsuit after lawsuit against him, each of which he must defend to the loss of time and money, and the tying up of courts and their officials. Maintenance is the reopening of the same suit, and its charges time after time in court after court. One need only be sure of the attitude of the plaintiff to strike back, if he is interested in heckling the defendant, and this can be demonstrated in evidence. The heckler is a dead duck. Such a response would surely damage Paul Brennan's overt position as a responsible, interested, affectionate guardian of his best friend's orphan child. Then, to put the top on the bottle, James Holden had crossed state lines in his flight from home. This meant that the case was not the simple proposition of appearing before a local magistrate and filing an emotional appeal. It was interstate. It smacked of extradition, and James Holden had committed no crime in either state. To Paul Brennan's qualifications for his henchman, he now added the need for flouting the law if the law could not be warped to fit his need. Finding a man with ambition, with a casual disregard for ethics, is not hard in political circles. Paul Brennan found his man in Frank Manason, a rising figure in the office of the district attorney. Manason had gubernatorial ambitions, and he was politically sharp. He personally conducted only those cases that would give him ironclad publicity. He preferred to lower the boom on a lighter charge than chance an acquittal. Manason also had a fine feeling for anticipating public trends, a sense of the drama, and an understanding of public opinion. He granted Brennan a conference of 10 minutes, and knowing from long experience that incoming information flows faster when it is not interrupted, he listened attentively, oiling and urging the flow by facial expressions of interest and by leaning forward attentively whenever a serious point was about to come forth. Brennan explained about James Holden, his superior education, and what it had enabled the lad to do. He explained the education not as a machine but as a system of study devised by James Holden's parents, feeling that it was better to leave a few stones lying flat and unturned for his own protection. Manason nodded at the end of the 10-minute time limit, used his desk interphone to inform his secretary that he was not to be disturbed until further notice, which also told Paul Brennan that he was indeed interested, and then said, "You know you haven't a legal leg to stand on, Brennan. So I find out. It seems incredible that there isn't any law set up to control the activity of a child." Incredible? No, Brennan, not so. To now it hasn't been necessary. People just do not see the necessity of laws passed to prevent something that isn't being done anyway. The number of outmoded laws, ridiculous laws, and laws passed in the heat of public emotion are always a subject for public ridicule. If the state legislature were to pass a law stating that any child under 14 may not leave home without the consent of his parents, every opposition newspaper in the state would howl about the waste of time and money spent on ridiculous legislation passed to govern activities that are already under excellent control. They would poll the state and point out that for so many million children under age 14, precisely 0 of them have left home to set up their own housekeeping. One might just as well waste the taxpayers' money by passing a law that confirms the universal law of gravity. But that's neither here nor there, he said. Your problem is to figure out some means of exerting the proper control over this intelligent infant. My problem rises higher than that, said Brennan ruefully. He dislikes me to the point of blind, unreasonable hatred. He believes that I am the party responsible for the death of his parents and furthermore that the act was deliberate. Tantamount to a charge of first-degree murder. Has he made that statement recently? Asked Manason. I would hardly know. When last did you hear him say words to that effect? At the time, following the accidental death of his parents, James Holden ran off to the home of his grandparents. Puzzled and concerned, they called me as the child's guardian. I went there to bring him back to his home. I arrived the following morning and it was during that session that James Holden made the accusation. And he has not made it since, to the best of your knowledge? Not that I know of. Hardly make anything out of that. 7 years ago. Not a formal charge, only a cry of rage, frustration, hysterical grief. The complaint of a 5-year-old made under strain could hardly be considered slanderous. It is too bad that the child hasn't broken any laws. Your success in collecting him the first time was entirely due to the associations he'd made with this automobile thief Caslow, you said his name was. We can't go back to that. The responsibility has been fixed, I presume, upon Jake Caslow in another state. Brennan, you've a real problem. How can you be sure that this James Holden will disclose his secret system of study even if we do succeed in cooking up some legal means of placing him and keep him in your custody? Brennan considered, and came to the conclusion that now was the time to let another snippet of information go. The system of study consists of an electronic device, the exact nature of which I do not understand. The entire machine is large and cumbersome. In it, as a sort of heart, is a special circuit. Without this special circuit, the thing is no more than an expensive aggregation of delicate devices that could be used elsewhere in electronics. One such machine stands unused in the Holden home because the central circuit was destroyed beyond repair or replacement by young James Holden. He destroyed it because he felt that this secret should remain his own, the intellectual inheritance from his parents. There is one other machine undoubtedly in full function and employed daily in the house on Martin's Hill under James Holden's personal supervision. Indeed? How, may I ask? It was rebuilt by James Holden from plans, specifications, and information engraved on his brain by his parents through the use of their first machine. Unfortunately, I have every reason to believe that this new machine is so booby-trapped and tamper-protected that the first interference by someone other than James Holden will cause its destruction.